In 1977 in Korea, there was a boxer. His name was Suan Hong. And he was a skinny man. And he was competing for world championship in bantamweight. And the game was in Panama. He was fighting against a Panamanian boxer. He was only about 17 years old, undefeated. And his punch was known as hammer. And our nation, Korea, back then, 1977, still very poor. Residue of Korean War still permeated in the society. People were depressed and wrestling with the poverty. Hopelessness was heavy upon the nation. And many also realizing, because this boxer Hong, he came from very poor home as well, with a widowed mother. And all he could eat was ramen almost every day. So people said, he's going to lose. But on the day, Koreans were excited and they were watching the TV. And I also, because my family didn't have a TV, we went to aunt's house, black and white TV, and we watched the game. And first round, he was okay, doing okay. And second round, he fell down 4 times. And of course, it was in Panama, so all the Panaman people were just excited, and oh, this is an easy win and all that. Then third round came, and Boxer Hong charged and went and fought against this boxer. His name was Hector Cara, something like that. And he knocked him out. And our nation was in uproar. And as he was returning back to Korea, we had a parade and so forth. And this boxer, skinny boxer, brought about such hope to the entire nation. And message was so clear: don't give up. Don't give up. Even though you fall 4 times, but rise up again. And you can win. You can do this. Let's do this. And it brought such hope. Even until today, older generation, people will talk about Boxer Hong. And that was a terminology stem out of that event. It was 4 fallings, but 5 risings. So just like in the book of Proverbs, the righteous may fall 7 times, but he rises up on 8th times. How about us? When we go through the life struggles, and we need to wrestle here and there, and in our own matches, how do we easily give up? Just because I have fallen 3 times or 4 times, and I lose strength of rising up again, and we easily give up. How about if there is a match between I and God? When we wrestle with God in our prayers, and when we plead before God, and we pray to God, and God seems to be silent, and He doesn't answer according to my timing and according to my likings, we easily give up in our prayer life as well. Just like that boxer gave us hope, and also the message was so clear: persist, persist, don't give up, persist. And we, as we continue on with the book of Genesis, as we examine life of Jacob, that's where we are going to take a look at. Jacob was a heel catcher. He was a deceiver. He was a go-getter. He deceived his brother and stole the birthright. And he deceived his own father and stole the blessing that should give to the oldest son. He also went to his uncle's house, the Laban's house, and he worked 7 years for the woman of his dream, beautiful Rachel. But he also got deceived by his uncle. He ended up working another 7 years for Leah, which was already given in the place of Rachel. And for 20 years he toiled, he worked hard, sleepless nights. But he was a man of persistence. He was a man of hard working. And God honored that and blessed him, and he was able to receive much possessions, many livestock, sheep, goat, camels. And after 20 years was expired, God told him to return back to the land of promise. And on his way, although he became successful man with a great wealth, there was one problem. There was one problem that threatens his life. And he can lose everything he accumulated until then. That was his older brother Esau. What he saw, he will reap. He cannot get away from it. That's spiritual principle. What you sow dissension, you sow deceit, you sow discord, you're going to reap corruption. And Esau, for 20 years, he was sharpening his sword until opportunity comes. When my younger brother returns back to this land, my own territory, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to have everything he has disappear. As he has come to the river Jabbok, there he sends his messengers to Esau to find out how angry he is, or 20 years has been forgotten, whatever it may be. And messengers are coming back again, giving him report. Your brother Esau is coming to get you with 400 men. And he was greatly distressed and also afraid. And there still, he's using his own schemes, because he divides all his company, all his possessions into two groups. Because if I divide these into two groups, my brother catches one company and try to kill them, and I will put my beautiful wife Rachel and Joseph there and belongings, and I will flee from him. But then still there's no peace in his heart. Let me bring more sheep and goat and camel and more than 550 different animals. And he sends messengers again into three groups. And when my brother sees this company, what is this? This is a gift from your servant, Jacob. Maybe this gift will appease his anger. And if the first group doesn't, then second gift and third gift. But still, there's no peace. He's still greatly afraid. So he praised God. God, have mercy upon me. Deliver me from the hands of my own brother. So what he does is he sends all his wives, 4 of them, 11 sons, and all his belongings and possessions, cross over river of Jabbok, and he remains alone at night. And he confronts with God, and he wrestles with God. That's the story we are going to pick up. The message here we can learn from is, wrestle with God at the time of your darkness. Wrestle with God in the time of your calamity. Or wrestle with God every night and every day. And prevail Him until He blesses you. Don't give up in your match with God. You can surrender. You can give up. You can fail. You can be defeated in the matches with the people, in the circumstances. But with God, don't ever give up. Wrestle with God and prevail Him until He answers your prayers, until He indeed blesses you. That's the message. And embracing that word from God, let's turn our Bible to the book of Genesis, chapter 32, from 22 through 32. We will read and further expound this story to hear the voice of God. Verse 22, and he arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of Jabbok.
He took them, sent them over to the brook, and sent over what he had.
Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day.
Now when he saw that he had prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him.
And he said, let me go, for the day breaks. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me.
So he said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob."
And he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with man, and have prevailed.
Then Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." And he said, "Why is it that you ask about my name?" And he blessed him there.
So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved.
Just as he crossed over Penuel, the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip.
Verse 32 altogether. Therefore, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the muscle that shrank, which is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the muscle that shrank. Amen. After he let all his family members and possessions cross over, he's left alone in the river of Jabbok. What does river Jabbok represent? Jabbok in Hebrew means pouring out, emptying out, and wrestling. Those are the meanings of Jabbok. And it so much represents how Jacob was at that moment. Jacob had to let go of all his wives, all his beloved sons, and all his belongings, and his wealth and possessions. He had to remain alone with God. God allows Jabbok in our lives. As we live in this life, walk with God, even though we try to rely upon God alone, oftentimes we still rely upon the people, we still rely upon circumstances. But we come to a point, there's nothing that I can be helped at. There's only one option available for my life, to be delivered from these calamities, from this pain, and from this situation, from this failure, and that is God Himself. So God allows the circumstances in our life that we have to let go of all our relationships and all our belongings, and we must stand before God alone and wrestle with Him. That represents Jabbok. That was where Jacob was. But here's also another choice. See, even at the river of Jabbok, you still have a choice. Because Jacob still can say, you know what, let me just divide it into two groups. If my brother attacks one group, and I will put in this another group, Rachel and Joseph, and things that I like, and also stronger animals in that company, and if they attack that, I'm going to flee. But Jacob will have to live in the fear of his brother as a slave for the rest of his life. Unfortunately, many Christians still live like that. God will bring that brother and that sister to the river of Jabbok. And it seems like there's only one choice, to cry out to God and ask God to bless me, deliver me, and rescue me. But yet, still, in that situation, they will divide their possessions, wealth, and they will still come up with their own scheme and live rest of life enslaved by the fear of money, circumstances, career, whatever they may be. But it is God's asking for us. I brought you to Jabbok. Wrestle with me. Wrestle with me. I will bless you. I will bless you. There are many stories in the Bible as well. The woman with the 12 years of issue of blood, she spent all her money to receive a cure, no avail. She asked all the medical doctors, come and heal me. And every option ran away. The only option she had was there was one day Jesus was passing by and she grabbed hem of his garment and she was delivered. You know, at New Year's, on January 2nd, Pastor Han asked the team leading pastors to go up to the prayer mountain because that was the day of our founding pastor, Pastor Kim's birthday. But he decided not to have a celebration, but instead spend some time on Prayer Mountain, Grace Prayer Mountain, along with his wife in prayer. But we wanted to surprise them, and we went up there, and I happened to arrive there earlier than the other group. So I had a chance to hear testimony from Mrs. Kim about how they were able to acquire their prayer mountain. I believe it's over 40 acres. You know how much it cost them to buy that? $400,000, 35 years ago. Because the owners, the couples were fighting, so they're in the process of getting divorced. So they wanted to get rid of all the possessions and divide money between them. But anyways, the down payment was $70,000, and they had to come out with it within 1 week. But they didn't have the money. So Pastor Kim asked Mrs. Kim, honey, is there any way we can get $70,000? So she had a compassion not only for the church, but for her husband. So she called a cousin who is wealthy and asked her if she was able to borrow $70,000. And the cousin said, no, we don't have that money. So she called another cousin, expecting she will lend me money. But she also said no. And then Mrs. Kim got the message. God is allowing me to lose all the options because He only wants me to rely upon God. So all night long, she cried out, just like a Jacob, asking God and repenting because I tried to use my own understanding and relied upon the people, but I come before you. Right now, in my eyes, I don't see any way we can get in few days $70,000. But I cry out unto you, God, have your own way. Next day, phone calls ringing, ring after ring, because back then they didn't have a KakaoTalk. And church members, different peoples that I have $20,000 here and there, $70,000, even more so, within 24 hours, they were able to get it, made a down payment. Long story short, there's a Grace Prayer Mountain. Always, behind great men of God, there's a greater woman of God. And of course, there are a few options. Behind the great man of prayer, there's a wicked woman behind because she forces him to pray. Unmarried people have absolutely no idea what I mean. At your own Jabbok, this is invitation from God. Don't wrestle with your circumstances. Don't struggle in your own head. Come with me. Wrestle with me. That is the message. How did Jacob respond then in that Jabbok? Instead of continuing with his own scheme, he stopped. For once, he stopped. And all resources are gone. I only have you, Lord, and I'm wrestling with you. And in that wrestling, there's a clear message that we need to embrace and mimic Jacob, even though he has many flaws. That is persistence. Persevere. Don't give up with God. You may give up in many other things. You don't have to watch Super Bowl. You can give up on that. But don't give up. Coming before God and wrestle with Him until He answers your prayer. So often, so many Christians, they may be so persistent in their own gaming, in their own pleasure, in their own pursuit, in their ambition. But things belonging to God, when they pursue God, they so easily give up on God. They come to early morning prayer. Okay, I'm decided. Let me do this. But I only slept 3 hours, and I come to the church and I pray. Oh, I'm so sleepy. Oh, excuse me, God. You understand me. And they go back to sleep. How often we have a dire prayer request, but we come to God and we pray and we cry out once or twice, and God seems to be silent. Done with it. Maybe God is not answering. And we go back to all the ways of relying and begging the people and struggling with the circumstances. But when we come before God, that's one thing we should never give up. Prayer is a persistent. Without persistence, you cannot become man of prayer or woman of prayer. Don't ever give up. The boxer fell 4 times, 5th time he rose. And there are many, many stories like that. Even in the Bible, when Jesus was teaching multitudes about the prayer, he talked about persistence. In the book of Luke alone, twice, with a similar illustration. One is in chapter 11, verse 8, because there was a friend, and in his household, another friend was visiting at night, and they didn't have any bread. So this friend went to another house, knocking at the door at midnight, asking, "Do you have some bread? Give me some bread." So the friend inside of their house, it's already late night, and all my children are on the bed, and I cannot rise and give you bread. But he's continually knocking, and this is what the Bible says. Jesus says, "I say to you, though he will not rise and give to him because he's a friend, yet because of his persistence, he will rise and give him as many as his needs." Not because he has this relationship, but because of his persistence, he has to rise up and give him bread. There's another illustration Jesus shared. Chapter 18, book of Luke. There's a widowed woman coming to evil judge and to settle her case because she's unfairly treated, and begging this evil judge to avenge her. He will not listen because he doesn't even fear God. But this is what evil judge says, according to Jesus. "Yet, because this widow troubles me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me." Not because he's a righteous, he's an evil man, but because she's continually coming to him and trouble him with her persistence, her case is avenged. You know, so often people, even as Christians, we don't seem to have much desires. And that's why we don't come before God, because we have nothing to ask, is it? But when we examine our lives, things that we like, we can be very persistent. But things belonging to God, and sometimes spiritually we have no desire. Absence of desire is a sinning against God. Did you know that? You know why? Because not only God himself gave us life here on earth and also eternally in heaven, but also for our life to be restored and redeemed, God sacrificed his only son Jesus on that cross. But we say, "I have nothing to desire in this life." That is not only pathetic, but that is a sinning against God, mocking God, because disvaluing the life he has given to us by sacrifice of his son. But with that desire, we come before God, we wrestle with him so easily, we give up. That's why there's no progress in our life. I'm very surprised. Pastor Han came up with the 40-14 fasting movement. And he will ask and invite all church members to participate, because I can recognize so many Christians, church members come inside the church buildings. We serve well, we put our smiles. But in our workplaces, with our friends, with our families in the world, they cannot see the light through us because we don't change. We are so stubborn. We are unwilling to change. So through the repentance, by the fasting and prayer, let us be transformed. Because it is a church. The national condition, spiritual decay, is a reflection of the condition of church. That is you and I. And that's why we come and want to wrestle God. God, I am sick and tired of being same old same, year after year. And I call myself a follower of Jesus Christ. But people in the workplaces cannot recognize I am a follower of Jesus Christ, I continually complain, I continually gossip, I continually manipulate, and I continually compromise in my lifestyle, and I cannot get over small, tiniest addiction in my life, and I came before God and asked God to deliver me once or twice, He doesn't answer me, so I'm in still mud. As long as we don't give up in our prayer, because our faith, our desire must be granted and proved by our God. That's why Jesus will ask us, what do you desire? What do you want me to do? And sometimes there are two blind men. What do you want me to do? He asked. He knew they were blind and calling us son of David, but he will still continually go and walk until he comes to a house. And they came and followed Jesus inside the house. Then, because that desire to be healed, to see, was granted by Jesus, and their faith and their persistence, not giving up on the way, blind, they don't know where Jesus is going, but still crying out, Son of David, have mercy upon us. And inside our house, at last, Jesus asked them, what do you want me to do for you? We want to see, and by your faith, you are healed. And one thing, Jacob, the Bible is clear. As the man who wrestled with Jacob, no longer I call you Jacob, you are Israel. Because with power you prevailed God and man. He's been prevailing man with his manipulation. His brother, his uncle, his father. He got everything he wanted, his own ways. But now with God, He also prevails. As long as we don't give up on God and His mercy, His faithfulness, His promise, something will happen. And we give glory to God. Thirdly, how did God answer his prayers? Jacob received much, much more blessings than what he asked for. His prayer request was one thing: rescue me from the anger of my older brother Esau. Deliver me. I don't want to die. Have mercy upon me, God. But there are more things God blessed him. First, God changed Jacob into Israel. His identity was changed. His character was changed. See, that's how God does. God uses the circumstances to bring us to Jabbok. And our request is, Lord, change this circumstance. Change this pain. Change this turmoil. And let this tribulation stop. And we ask God to change our circumstances and people around us. But God smiles at us and calmly says, as He wrestles with us, you come to me to change your environment, but I change you. That's what happened to Jacob. Jacob was forever changed on that river and turned from Jacob to Israel. That's why, apart from becoming men of prayer and women of prayer, we will not become disciples of Jesus Christ. Because in that wrestling, in that endurance, in that patience with God, God molds us, God touches us, God hits our hip socket, and He redeems us, renews us, transforms us, disciples us, and breaks us. If we are unwilling to wrestle with God and go on with our life using my scheme continually, that's why many Christians, because they're not wrestling with God, they don't change. They're always complaining about circumstance, and they're using their own smartness to change circumstances, and it's a vicious cycle. Not only circumstances do not change, they don't change themselves, and they remain as immature, complaining baby Christians, even though they've been attending church for 20 and 30 years. wrestle with God. Don't give up. Become man and woman of prayers. Don't give up. As long as we endure with God, He will change us. And the circumstance is no problem anymore because He changed us first. Second blessing and answer Jacob received was he was broken. His hip socket was touched and he began to limp from that day on. What does this mean? Forever from that day on, he will now rely upon his own strength. He will walk with God. Even though it may be slower, even though it's an inconvenience, and being yoked with Jesus Christ is a light burden, but it's much more glorious. And that's why Jacob, from that day on, limping but walking with God, relying upon Him for the rest of his life. Third blessing is that he saw the face of God. He saw a face of God. In our wrestling with God, we say, I feel distance from God. And we don't come to God. We don't wrestle with God. We easily give up God. And then we say, there's no feeling of His love, no presence, no power experienced in my life. But as he wrestled all throughout the night in that darkness, instead of complaining, instead of being passive, instead of just being hopeful, doing nothing, he spent all night and went through the darkness, the tunnel of the trial and agony, wrestling with God. And when we do that, we are able to see the glory of God. And the glory of God is so addictive. And once we see the glory of God, we cannot live without it. Once we see the face of God, we cannot see without it. All other glories that Satan shows through the world are so mundane and so trivial, we will get rid of them. As we concluded this story, there's another astounding aspect of this story. The question is, who is this man that wrestled with Jacob? Bible is very clear. Whenever there are angel of the Lord, it clearly describes and denotes the angel of the Lord appeared. But here, suddenly, a man wrestled with Jacob. It never says it's angel of the Lord. Who is this man? Later, Jacob says, I saw God face to face. It is a pre-incarnated Jesus Himself. How do we know this? When we look at first two verses of this chapter, same location, amazing thing has occurred. Let's look at it, verse 1 and 2, chapter 32. So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's camp. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. He saw angels of God. It's Mahanaim is the same place. It's a nearby river Jabbok. Peniel, it's the same place, different names attributed. He saw angels of God. Then he's being afraid. Who is the captain of the host of angels? That is Jesus Christ Himself. I believe Jesus was already there, brought His angels. Why? Because Esau represents angel of death with the 400 men. Because this sinner Jacob, deceiver, conniver, thief, deserved death punishment. An angel of death with the 400 men marching towards Jacob and trying to kill him. But knowing this, captain of the host of angels, Jesus Himself with the angels descending down, and there He stands in the river of Jabbok and goes, no more. You stand. The angel of the death, you stand right there. Yes, Jacob deserved death. No, not anymore. Because I'm wrestling with him. And Jacob prevails. How is it? How is it possible a sinner wrestles with a perfectly righteous man And yet, righteous man gets defeated in a way. Just like that. At the cross, we deserve death penalty and die on the cross, but we prevail Him, the Christ, and He dies on the cross instead so that we may have a life. The Bible ambiguously says the man blessed Jacob. What is that blessing? The blessing is called grace. By grace, we are delivered from Esau, the angel of the death, because he lets us to prevail him. And he died on the cross and rose again. If that is the man who wants to wrestle with me, I will wrestle with him for the rest of my life, because I will always prevail him, or he will always let me prevail him. Let us all rise. At what point have we given up? At what point we wrestled with God and let go of His arm? Always, always let us wrestle with God and don't give up. Not only He will deliver us from calamities, not only He will answer our prayer requests, more than that, He will continually change us and make us Israel. Isn't it awesome, glorious thing for Jacob? Because the descendants of Abraham were not called Abrahamites, nor Isaacites. They are called Israelites. Even until today, that nation is called Israel. Not Abraham, not Isaac. When we come before Him, Lord, rescue me. As long as we don't give up on Him, He changes us. He reveals His glory. We end up seeing His face. We may be limping, inconvenient, that I may have to pray to Him and consult Him all the time. But in that limping, in my weakness, the power of God is further manifested. Let us call His name and pray. 1, 2, 3. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Dear Jesus, we thank you so much for